Right now, Russia is burning, breaking and begging for help. Putin's army is running out of tanks, sanctions and crushing his war machine. And Ukraine just launched the biggest drone attack in 6 months. 251 strikes in one night. 8 airports shut down, entire cities in blackout. And in a desperate move, Cuban soldiers are now being sent to fight for Moscow. Welcome to Ukraine Today. I'm Zora Sava-Kolesnikova, and in this episode we uncover how Russia's empire is collapsing from within, as Ukraine is harder than ever. Russia runs out of tanks. Sanctions cripple Putin's war machine. Russian tanks are disappearing from the battlefield, literally. Moscow's military-industrial complex can't keep up with the losses, and experts say Russia is now facing a critical shortage of armored vehicles. Sanctions have shared production, cutting all vital parts of technology. The so-called Second Army of the world is running out of steel, chips and time. It is the final collapse of Russia's war machine, and how long before its front lines crumble? Full story in our report.
Russian tanks are on the verge of extinction. It seems the Russian military-industrial complex can't keep up, and soon there may be nothing left to fight with at all. And apparently, sanctions are to blame for this.
The role of sanctions here is more about the fact that these are streams, these are sufferings, a worsening situation where there is a certain gap in which Russia is operating, and it significantly slows down the implementation of technologies like artificial intelligence, which Russia could have been developing. It seems
that Putin's so-called resilient Russian economy is starting to show some serious cracks.
Sooner or later, the inevitable overheating of the military economy may not necessarily lead to its complete collapse, but rather to a very sharp and significant downturn. The general economic trends in the Russian Federation will also affect the military sector of the economy.
It would seem that, for the first time since 2022, salaries have started to fall at Russia's most important enterprises. And yes, we're talking about companies in the military-industrial complex.
Undoubtedly, lending to enterprises in the military-industrial complex has an impact. And the form and volume of this lending differ from those in the non-military sector. This was an advantage at first, but now it's become a disadvantage. Having essentially reached its peak, it's now either a plateau or a decline.
But how do staffing shortages and economic problems affect the expansion of Russia's military-industrial complex?
With the Russian economy's ability to supply the army, to provide military equipment and ammunition, those abilities are not limitless either. Moreover, even with rapid growth, the modern Russian economy may not reach Soviet-era levels.
Of course, sanctions are no joke, especially when they affect the condition and quality of your military equipment, or maybe even halt its new production altogether. But that's when Soviet-era tanks come to the rescue.
The focus was placed on restoring Soviet equipment. Old Soviet equipment taken out of storage, restoring ammunition, and again reworking and preparing it for combat. But those resources are not limitless either.
But now the time has come when old equipment doesn't make the job easier, but rather complicates it.
There are fewer and fewer units that can actually be repaired. They have to repair things that aren't really repairable, to take them apart, yes, and assemble working units from several others. This requires significantly more effort, work, and so on.
So instead of producing new and modern equipment, Russia is increasingly using old and worn-out machinery.
The production of new equipment is hindered, yes, including by sanctions, and also the unpreparedness of the production base. That's precisely why the significant ramp-up in the actual production of modern and advanced types of weaponry is nowhere near the necessary pace. Russia truly needs to adequately make up for its substantial losses on the battlefield. Consequently, they much prefer to fund what will deliver tangible and immediate results here and now, rather than tomorrow or even the day after that.
We shouldn't forget about Putin's loyal friends, China and Iran, who are actually helping them a great deal.
we have always been together, so we remain together even now.
But any delivery is more a way for Beijing to keep Moscow on a short leash.
It's precisely China's technological base that is helping the Russians stay afloat. At the same time, the Chinese are helping Moscow from the position of a suzerain. That's why they keep their hand on the tap. If Moscow acts the right way, they might open the tap.
But in the end, what do we have as of today? It is known that in 2024, Russia's military industry reached the limits of its capabilities. But what are Russia's prospects now?
There might very well be a so-called significant plateau, meaning that they have effectively reached their absolute maximum output capacity, and consequently they simply cannot grow any further beyond this point. However, they can certainly avoid any potential decline through carefully implemented administrative measures and strategic management.
The only question is, how long will the Kremlin be able to maintain this level? And could it turn out that an unexpected blow will come not from the front, but from within?
Corruption in Russia is our ally. The more the high-ranking generals and the powerful icebreakers, who are integral components of the vast Russian military-industrial complex, persistently engage in illicit activities and systematic corruption, the significantly diminished their prospects become for maintaining their strategic position and influence on this crucial plateau. At present, their widespread pilfering and misappropriation of resources are quite extensive, and regrettably, their insatiable appetites for further illicit gains and unchecked expansion continue to escalate with each passing year.
But of course, sanctions are only a small part of what can help Ukraine defend itself against the Russian Federation. Nevertheless, an important factor is also the increase in Ukrainian military production.
You can't just believe that sanctions will decide everything. In the same way, we need to develop power within our own ranks, which is what we're doing, and respond to strikes with strikes. This is one of the ways. Sanctions are just an alternative to weapons, but not a replacement for weapons.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Russia under massive drone attack, 8 airports shut down, 251 strikes in one night. Chaos and fire across Russia, the biggest drone assault in 6 months. From Tuapse to Novgorod, Ukrainian drone hit 16 regions, leaving power plants in flames and airports paralyzed. In Bryansk, a strike on a Klinsky terminal power plant caused blackouts, while fires erupted. How did Ukraine pull off its most powerful coordinated attack yet? And what does it mean for Putin's collapse in air defense? Full story in our report.
8 airports closed, fires from Tuapse to Nizhny Novgorod, 251 drones over 16 regions. From October 5th to 6th, Russia faced the largest scale attack by Ukrainian drones in the past 6 months. A strike was carried out on the thermal power plant in Klinsky, Bryansk region. There, power outages began. And in Belgorod, there was a blackout. Part of the city was left without electricity for a long time, and this is not the first time.
And the city flickered. Good morning, dear friends. As a result of the overnight work by our power engineers and emergency services, as of today, there are still partial outages in 24 settlements affecting 3,400 residents.
On the eve of winter and the heating season, Russia is once again routinely striking at Ukraine's energy infrastructure. And now, for the first time in the 3.5 years of war, Kyiv is not only threatening retaliatory strikes, but actually carrying them out.
If they threaten a blackout in the capital of Ukraine, then the Kremlin should know there will be a blackout in the capital of Russia as well.
Any action by Russia aimed at harming Ukraine will provoke a symmetrical response. This also applies to the energy sector.
The president said it absolutely right. We will find both the means and the weapons, and we will carry out these operations. They will definitely realize that this way they will not achieve any advantage. Any action by Russia will definitely be met with a counteraction. Andriy Inatov, Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.
Blackouts in Russian regions and even in Moscow are quite possible. And there are several reasons for this. One of them is, of course, strikes by the armed forces of Ukraine on the power system. And the second is the sanctions that are already in effect, and accordingly, the inability to purchase spare parts and equipment. And the existing ones are degrading and becoming unusable.
Russia's energy sector today is a powder keg. The power deficit has reached 25 gigawatts. This is not an isolated failure, but a systemic collapse. And this is even before any systematic strikes, which Russia itself is bringing closer by its actions against our energy sector. Instead of investing in its own thermal and hydroelectric power plants, Moscow is losing reserves due to sanctions and aging equipment. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation.
If Ukraine starts systematically striking thermal and power plants across all regions of Russia, as happened in the Belgorod region on the night from Sunday to Monday, it will be extremely difficult to restore the Russian energy sector. Currently, 42 regions of Russia are already introducing restrictions on consumption during peak hours in the center of the country. In Siberia and the Far East, an energy shortage is felt everywhere, and that's even without any capacities being knocked out. When the Russians destroy Ukraine's energy infrastructure, we have a safety net. We receive kilowatts from the EU as well as spare parts for repairs. In turn, Russia does not have such assistance. Their energy workers can only rely on themselves. And as the latest strike in the south showed, Russia is facing a very long, extremely cold and truly dark winter.
Cuban soldiers fight for Putin. Latin America joins Russia's war. A shocking twist in Putin's war. Cuba has joined the list of countries supplying fighters for Russia's army. Dozens of Cuban soldiers are reportedly being sent to the front lines in Ukraine. Moscow is desperate and is reaching all the way to Latin America for manpower. Why is Havana helping the Kremlin, and what does this mean for the global map of Putin's allies? Full story in our report.
There are new additions to the ranks of allies fighting for Russia. This time they're coming from faraway Latin America, Cuba.
They have been actively fighting since the early 1960s, ever since the revolutionary leader Fidel Castro came to power in Cuba, and Cuban soldiers have also fought in various conflicts across Latin America as well. Later, Fidel Castro had the idea of landing the Cuban army in Africa, sparking an uprising there to turn all of Africa communist. There were such delusional ideas for Cubans. Given the country's absolute poverty, war is one of the ways to make money.
According to classified documents from the US State Department reviewed by Reuters, Havana is not just supporting the Kremlin's policy. It may have sent up to 5,000 of its citizens to fight in the war against Ukraine.
I knew the contract was real when I arrived. The Russian Federation brought me here. Everyone here knew why they came. I know this for sure. Everyone knew they were coming to war.
This is Enrique Gonzalez. He joined the ranks of the Russian army to make some money by killing Ukrainians.
I found out that my beloved son had actually been recruited on the very day he left. I honestly don't know how this entire process truly happened, because he never ever told me anything at all about it. I realized it when he was at the airport. He called me and told me everything.
The active recruitment of Cubans for the war began back in 2023 after the Russian dictator signed a decree allowing foreigners who joined the army to obtain Russian citizenship through an expedited process. After that, dozens of Cubans rushed to join the war.
Poverty forces people to do it. If we didn't live in such poverty, I'm sure these people wouldn't have gone to Russia. But as it is, you work and work and work. My husband worked hard in Cuba, but one day he told me, I can't take it anymore. I asked him what happened. He replied, don't worry, I know what I'm doing. My husband was like that.
According to available information, recruitment centers are located in different regions. Candidates are promised salaries from $1,500 to $2,500 a month, citizenship or residency, compensation in case of injury, and other benefits. For some companies, Moscow creates entire package deals. Payment, housing, legalization, all of this makes the offer attractive to economically vulnerable people.
The method of luring foreign soldiers is quite simple. They target the poorest countries, meaning Latin America or Africa, or even Asian countries, I mean North Korea. They offer more or less competitive payments, and people are willing to go fight. After all, it's not just about the Cubans who are fighting, about 5,000 according to the numbers circulating online. We're talking about around 3,000 North Korean military personnel and several thousand mercenaries from African countries.
Intermediaries, including travel agencies, are recruiting thousands of foreign mercenaries into Russia's so-called elite international battalion. They use flashy advertising campaigns, promises of high earnings, and tricks when signing contracts. Recruitment and agitation mainly take place through Telegram, according to the Los Angeles Times.
The advertisement was simple. Sign up for a year to fight on Russia's side in the Special Military Operations Zone, that is, in the war in Ukraine, and receive citizenship, free medical care, money, and land, according to the Los Angeles Times.
But not everything is done honestly. Contracts for foreigners are often drafted in such a way that they cannot fully understand them. No translator is provided, and there is no Wi-Fi. After arriving at the front, requests to terminate the contract require a payment of up to $6,000. Another method recruiters use is student and tourist visas. Many foreigners initially come to Russia on these visas and then sign a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense. They are met by brokers and Russian officers right at the airports. To motivate new mercenaries, recruiters publish messages about supposed victories of the Russian army while concealing defeats. Despite all the risks, foreigners' interest does not disappear. Meanwhile, in the United States, diplomatic efforts are being stepped up to neutralize the Cuban factor in Russia's war against Ukraine. The Donald Trump administration is mobilizing American diplomats to fight against a UN resolution calling for the lifting of the decades-long trade embargo on Cuba. State Department documents emphasize that Cuba uses international initiatives, such as the annual UN resolution, to present itself as a victim of sanctions, even though in reality its citizens are involved in combat on the side of the aggressor.
The Cuban regime has failed to protect its citizens from being used as pawns in the Russia-Ukraine war, a State Department representative stated.
Every recruited soul is not just a number in the statistics. For the Kremlin, it's a chance to get ahead. Moscow is systematically expanding the pool of foreigners willing to fight for its interests. For the terrorist state, such people are nothing more than cheap labor and cannon fodder. For the mercenaries, it's a chance to make easy money.
That's all for today on Ukraine Today. If you stand for truth and freedom, like, comment and subscribe. Want to help us keep exposing Putin's war and telling Ukraine's story to the world? Become a sponsor and join our mission. Your support fuels independent journalism and the fight for justice. Stay strong, stay informed and stay with Ukraine.